Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We're very happy to have you here. Today, we're going to talk about Hanukkah, which is also this year begins on December 25th, and is like the more culturally overwhelming holiday based on miracles and faith. So we're going to talk about that and how we can relate to that today. I want to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for being a sponsor of these programs from the Senior Community Center. They have independent living, assisted living, and a vibrant memory care community up on Rolling Bay. To learn more about their programs, to take a tour, to find out about day stay and respite care, call 206-594-1010. Check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. And if you call, ask Jamie or Celia about taking a tour and getting a free lunch or dinner as part of that tour. We would also like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water who have lived here since time immemorial. We honor them and we are grateful for their stewardship and for teaching us to be better stewards of these lands and waters. To get us started, my good friend and the Senior Center board member, Ann Lovejoy, is with us. So, Ann, thank you very much. And I know that you were kind of putting this panel together. Let's talk a little bit about what you're hoping we might be able to talk about.
Thanks, Reed, and thanks to everybody for showing up. I've been really interested in this cultural series we've been doing to learn so much about holidays and observances and rituals and things that I thought I knew a lot about, and discover that in many cases I didn't really. And I thought we could put a little spotlight on Hanukkah because it's one of those holidays that I think I've been heard it called the Jewish Christmas, which I think must be fairly offensive, actually. And, and had people say things like, it was never a big deal when I was a kid, but now it's a big deal. Or have my granddaughter who came in and said, Granny, that's not a menorah. A menorah just means any candelabra with more than one candle in it. That's, and I've already forgotten the word, but maybe one of you can help me out. But it's like, it's becoming more common for schools, I think, to have children exposed to multicultural events and information than it was in my growing up days, which God knows are quite a long time ago. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to kind of start off, and we have an interesting mix of people today. Some people who have come quite recently to Judaism or are in sort of on a path of learning more about it. Some people who are deeply steeped in traditions. Some people who are kind of exploring traditions of the divine feminine aspects of Judaism that are often overlooked. And I just think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So I wanted to invite all of you, anybody, to jump in with some of your favorite memories or childhood. It's those of you who had Hanukkah observances at home when you were young. What was your favorite part? And I can tell you right now that my two neighbors said the food, both of them. Katy, do you want to jump in?
Sure. When my grandmother died, my grandfather decided that she was the one who kept track of the family and everything. So he decided that twice a year he would create this tradition, once on Hanukkah, and then 6 months later he created a family birthday, so he didn't have to remember everybody's birthday. But there would be some kind of a family contest, and he would send out whatever the rules were, and everybody would write a poem or a letter or some kind of a word puzzle or something. And then for Hanukkah, he would send out everybody's entries, and then he would pick a winner, and everybody got Hanukkah gelt, whether you won or not. It was really fun.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah. Zann, do you have anything that you remember with great fondness?
I grew up in the South, and we were in a little town. We were the only Jews, and so there was a lot of a lot of like, make sure this Hanukkah is as good as Christmas or better, kind of thing. So, so it was a big deal. Like the house was always decorated, and we always had latkes and applesauce and sour cream and presents for every night, which was like incredible because I have four brothers and sisters, so that was a lot of gifts.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, just it was yeah, it was a thing. It was a thing for us. And as you say, of course, traditionally it's like the littlest holiday, it's just a little minor holiday, but very sweet.
It made me sort of think about how Cinco de Mayo, which is a tiny holiday observed only in very few places in Mexico, became this huge deal in America, mostly because it was a time to drink, I think.
Yeah.
But food
Tequila.
holidays are always very popular, right? Eve, what about you?
Oh, the two things that come to mind is we had a giant Star of David that was really just cardboard tubes that were covered with tinfoil, and there were with some lights strung, so that it was a menorah. And yeah, menorah means anything, but when I say menorah, it means a Hanukkah menorah because nobody keeps the 7-day menorah around. So yeah. And also, we had really like 2 nights of Hanukkah. One night was kind of the family night. The other night was with my cousins, my father's sister's kids. And so we'd exchange presents, 2 nights. We didn't get 8 different presents, 8 different nights of presents. I grew up in a Milwaukee suburb that was heavily Jewish, though we were at the far edge of Judaism on the suburb. You only had to go across the ravine, and that was supposed to be restricted property. You went across the railroad tracks, which were behind my neighbor's house, and there was a golf club that did not allow Jews in it, and I always felt I was taking my life in it, even walking over there. But yeah, I mean, spending time with my cousins and my grandmother, that was wonderful. I don't remember much going on with the other side of the family. I have no Hanukkah memories of my other grandmother when I was a little kid for Hanukkah. I don't know why, I just don't. But the big Star of David, when that came out, that was a big event. And one year, I know when my younger brother and I were really little, but I must have been in 1st, 2nd grade already. And my mom actually hung, had bought those nets of candies, the candy stockings, the Christmas stockings, the ones that are just like a mesh full of candy. And she, tacked those up at the fireplace. My brother and I came downstairs, and she said, "Look what Santa brought." And we just both looked at her and said, "Santa's not Jewish." But what was good about Christmas and Hanukkah was that my friend Mark across the street would have a big, Christmas deal and get lots and lots of presents. And Christmas morning, I had to wait an appropriate amount of time, and then I had to go over to Mark's because he needed somebody to play with his new toys.
So in your lifetime, you saw the beginning of the blend that Christmas was nudging its way into the Hanukkah time, right?
Well, we didn't do anything really for Christmas. I didn't know just that one thing, and my mom gave up on it. And I know that I wasn't supposed to tell my brother that Santa Claus wasn't, real, because, he would tell his friends, and then, there'd be, civil war on the, playground. But we all knew that Christmas was something else.
I think
And
that saying that Santa was not Jewish is a perfect response to that.
yeah, well, we were clever kids.
Anybody else got a memory or a thought about it?
So
Mike?
I am not Jewish, but my wife is Jewish. And I have two sons, and I always wanted to um, share in the Jewish holidays. My favorite is Passover, um, partly because of the food also. Um, but I used to have very, very positive feelings about Christmas, more secular feelings. In my family, growing up, my father used to like to play Festival of Lessons and Carols from Oxford or Cambridge or one of those. Anyway, and I couldn't understand why my wife felt sort of hostile or grumpy about Christmas all the time. And to me, it was just like beautiful trees, beautiful lights, gifts, family togetherness and stuff. And she could never explain to me why she didn't feel like she could participate in Christmas. But finally, her best girlfriend from junior high school, whose name is Ida, sat me down and said, "Let me explain to you what it's like to be Jewish during Christmas." And she said she was a premature baby nurse in a hospital. And she said, there's music everywhere. There's decorations everywhere. She said, I'm trying to take care of the babies in the premature baby nursery, and I have to remove the sprig of mistletoe over the bassinet. And she said, you get teased about it if you don't want to participate in a gift exchange. You got teased about you're a Scrooge. And all of a sudden, it just came clear to me how oppressive that was. So ever since then, I thank Ida for opening my eyes. It was an epiphany.
I wonder if it's even, and I'd love anybody to comment about this, but Christmas being a high holy day in the Christian calendar, like maybe not quite as, but like Easter. Easter would be bigger probably in a traditional Christian thinking. But it so overpowers other faith traditions, especially since it's been wedded to commercialism. So it's a you know, Christmas has something to do with buying cars now. Anyway, um, whereas, on the other hand, uh, Jewish high holy days like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur don't seem to get much awareness at all. Um, I'm just thinking about whether that's more hurtful that you happen to have an overlapping holiday and the Christian majority swims right over the top of it.
Zann, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah, it's a hard one. I think I used to feel so much like there was like a party going on, and there was this big build up to the party, and everybody's invited except for the Jews. It really had this feeling of like, as a kid, I really felt, it's just like it's everywhere. It's so ubiquitous, and it's so like it's going to be amazing, and it's, there's just, it's selling all the things of family, happiness, plenty, generosity, community. It's like, all that. And yeah. And then, when I got older and I married into a family of Quakers, but who had Christian traditions, I realized these people are so stressed. This holiday is so stressful. I just was like really, I just had so much compassion for Christians. I was like, oh my gosh, what a lot of pressure on people during this holiday to get all these gifts and to have enough and to do all these parties and to, create this thing that's impossible and to have the perfect family that you enjoy being with. And so I don't know, I think my feelings have, and then I was like, oh, I like Hanukkah is like so simple. It's like you light one candle, then you light two candles. You know, it's just the simplest, sweetest little solstice hot, celebration. It just is like so lovely. And I was like, oh yeah. And you get latkes.
Right, exactly.
And you get vodka. And
Yeah.
and there's just no pressure for putting on the big family Hanukkah dinner. There's just none, zero. There's no, well, this didn't go quite by plan because there's not that much to plan. And just
Dale,
like
I
Zann
think,
is saying,
oh,
that
sorry.
I became intensely aware of how unhappy Christians were because they could never live up to they could never live up to their expectations, their own expectations.
Mhm. No, you're absolutely right about that. Dale, I was curious. I know you don't want to talk a lot because you got a frog in your throat, but as someone who is a recent convert, how do these holidays play out for you?
Well, I guess this is our third Hanukkah now, since we started the process of conversion. And well, the first one was kind of bewildering, trying to figure out what was going on. Because, well, we were attending synagogue, and we were actually in a online, because late COVID,
Right.
Jewish, conversion, intro to Judaism class there, so I had obtained a menorah and candles and all of that, and I was just, trying to figure out what was happening with it. And we were intentionally trying to not do Christmas stuff, since, we had been raised with it. We were both coming from Christianity, but we were feeling that we really needed to not do that. And you start noticing, it's like, yeah, all the holiday parties and all the things where they, like, I'm part of a craft guild, and they were like, bring a Christmas ornament to the dinner. And I was going, okay, I need to find some Jewish embroidery patterns, and so I can make a Hanukkah ornament. And but it was so I feels like each year we're learning a little more, and we're connecting a little more with the Jewish community in the area. And so it's feeling less awkward.
Mhm.
And it's kind of weird this year because, the previous years it's been earlier in December, but it's having it be so late that it's essentially starts on Christmas night, because usually it's been over by the time Christmas comes along, so you can just ignore Christmas and enjoy that. You maybe have the week off, maybe has the week off work, and that's all there is about it. But yeah, this year I have a menorah that hasn't been lit up yet, because we don't light it until Wednesday night. So
Bill Luria, who was going to join us but is on the road, sent in some questions that he said and one of them was, what new food item has been added to the traditional Hanukkah meal? So actually, Katy, can you talk a little about the traditional Hanukkah meal? Because maybe a lot of people only know the latkes, which are great. Let's be clear.
Yeah,
There's more, right?
as far as I know, it's just latkes and other things cooked in oil. So sufganiyot, which is basically like donut holes, is the other big thing. And we never had a traditional Hanukkah meal growing up the way that you would have, a traditional Passover Seder. And really, like, from a Jewish perspective, like in most parts of the world, Hanukkah is not a major holiday. It's just in this country, in places where Christmas is such a big deal, that Hanukkah's kind of glommed onto that as like, okay, well, here's your consolation prize. But it's not, were it not for Christmas, I think that we would celebrate Hanukkah in the way we do other minor Jewish holidays. Like, there's a tradition for, Simchat Torah, or I don't know, whatever. But it's just not, if either it's not that prescribed or my family didn't know about it. So we never had a traditional Hanukkah meal.
I think our traditional Hanukkah meal was cold cuts,
Yeah.
bagels, corned beef, pastrami, cheese,
All is a safe bet.
Oh,
stuff you didn't have to worry about getting it more of at the store. It was just there, salami and stuff like that. Because the biggest thing for us was all of a sudden stores are closed. What are we supposed to do?
there's a really interesting connection with cheese and Judith and Holofernes. That for some reason Judith is commemorated by eating cheese, which I thought was an interesting story. I did not know. But it has to do with Judith was sort of turned into some relationship to Judah Maccabee, the hero of the Hanukkah oil story, even though they weren't actually connected in time at all. And they thought maybe that it had to do partly with Esther, but the adding Judith to the story, supposedly Judith fed the enemy king, who I forget who he was. Holofernes, right? Fed a cheese so that he would drink a lot and get drunk so she could cut his head off, which was handy, just a quick way to solve a problem. But so every time you have cheese, you celebrate the cleverness of Judith. And that's why the cheese has become more importantly woven into the Hanukkah meal. But I didn't really I thought it was a really cool story, but I'm not sure I found more evidence of that. Mike, did you want to say something about it?
Well, to Cheryl, the traditional meal is to go out on Christmas to Chinese.
Oh yeah,
because they'd be open when all the
And
other
to go to the
restaurants were
movies
closed.
too.
go to the movies or go bowling.
Oh.
But I
Yeah,
see a lot
this
of
year
heads
on
nodding,
Christmas,
right?
we're going to there's a theater in Seattle that shows a sing-along Fiddler on the Roof with
Oh,
catered
Oh my word.
kosher Chinese food.
Oh, that is
There
fabulous.
is no such thing.
That is
So-
fabulous. Susan Dean.
thank you. And I'm curious about the menorah because I think it is such a beautiful tradition, not understanding it completely. And is there a prayer each night that you add a candle? Is there something, a coming together and maybe a different prayer for each night? Curious
No,
about that.
same prayer.
There's special prayers for the first night, but then you do the same prayer. It's just the Shabbos prayer, the Friday night prayer for the candles, except you say Hanukkah instead of Shabbos. So, but that is one thing, and there are songs. We always sing different Hanukkah songs when we light the
But
candles too.
mostly the best Jewish holiday songs are the ones that Jews wrote for Christmas.
Oh,
So just remember,
true.
90%, all the popular songs that you hear for Christmas written by Jews.
yeah.
In July at the poolside in Hollywood is what I heard, right?
One of my favorite stories about that is that, the Rudolph the Reindeer story was written by a Jew, and it was about having a Jewish nose that made you stand out. And so that's actually
wow.
where that story came from. And then he wrote all the music, I was like, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, you wouldn't worry about a white Christmas if it wasn't for Irving Berlin. And the Christmas song was actually not written in the summer. It was written during, the Christmas season by a pool in, Hollywood, in Southern California, which may as well have been summer.
And probably made more money than all the rest of Christmas traditions put together. But I think there has been quite a lot of blending in the last, I don't know, in my lifetime, certainly, of like Christmas has gotten secularized enormously, especially since in the schools, the kids aren't allowed to sing traditional carols because they're religious. So they sing Frosty the Snowman and stuff like that, which turns it more and more into the secular. And then, of course, it's a candy holiday. Huge. Walk in the grocery store. And any of the candy holidays tend to kind of devolve pretty quickly into just, food and family, which is fine. But I would say that the spiritual quality of Christmas is pretty sketch these days. And I'm curious about, so Hanukkah celebrates, it's sort of like the Feast of Lights, right? The miracle of the oil lasting a lot longer than anyone thought it was going to. But I'm curious if there's kind of a solstice, return of the light quality to that too. Zann?
Yeah, I could answer that. One of the fun facts and kind of a Christmas Hanukkah thing is that Hanukkah starts on the 25th day of the darkest month of the year. So it starts on the 25th day of Tevet, which is, it's a lunar calendar. So you're going into the first day of the year. First day of the month is a new moon. And it's actually when you see the first sliver of the moon. So the 25th day is actually the darkest day of the year, not the longest night, but the darkest day because it's the new moon of the winter solstice. So that's how Hanukkah. So you light one candle, you light two. By the third, it's like the darkest. You're at the dark of the moon. By the fifth day or the sixth, depending on the calendar, you start to see a sliver of the moon. So it's starting to come back, and so in a very visceral way, you experience the solstice. You experience going into the dark and then coming back out again.
Which would have been so much more powerful before electricity.
Yes.
And when people
Yeah.
were outdoors more, right? And connected to the moon. Like now, you might have a hard time finding the moon on a city, and
Well, and
night.
it seems like such a great tie to the religious story of being trapped and not sure what you're going to do, and the light comes.
And
There's
stays.
hope.
There's hope. That's right. Beyond hope. Hope that beyond reason, right? I always love that quality of it too.
One of the interesting things is that the Christian Bible has a book of Maccabees. Jewish people, we have no Maccabees in our texts at all. And in fact, Jews did not like the Maccabees when they ruled. They were really unpopular. To a large extent, Mattathias, the father of Judah, it is Mattathias, is that right?
Yeah.
He was basically, the Jewish Taliban.
Oh, good grief.
Well, protesting the Greeks trying to make ban Judaism, right?
Antiochus the Third, I think the third, was crazy. And, it's not that Judah Maccabee and, the Jews defeated them. It's that, he got deposed at home.
So there's a
Because he was
hopeful
just-
theme to this story.
He was the central one because he wanted everybody to be like him. And he just gone too far, and messing around in Judea was not allowed because, that was the territory between Antioch and Egypt. So we give a lot of credit to the Maccabees, but it was actually my people down in Alexandria that, turned the tide. Okay, just saying.
Okay, just so we know.
Just so we know.
But I think that is interesting that, again, even in those historical roots, there's a lot of what some of the things I was reading said. It's like folklore that's become meta folklore. Like it takes on a whole tradition beyond the tradition, right? Meta folklore is folklore about folklore. Like
Yeah. I think that's a really good description.
That's one of the things I discovered. And this, the first time I saw that, it was in relation to the dreidel story, because one of the interesting, well, Zann, you speak.
Oh, I was just going to say, I find the story inspiring in a counter way, because the Jews of the Talmud of, the time when they were trying to decide what books go in and what books go out of the canon, did not put in the Maccabees for a reason. And the reason I understand, and I know there's many reasons, but the reason I understand is because they did not want to have this example lifted up of a violent revolution. They were like, this is not where we're, you know, it did not go well. It was not a success. I mean, it was in that, they took over, but it was like 60 years of fighting. I mean, it was really bad. And it was within a few generations afterwards that Rome took over. And as Eve said, the Maccabees overreached and they became both priests and rulers, which you were not allowed to do in Judaism. There was supposed to be a separation of powers. And yeah, they ended up allowing Rome to come in, which became, of course, the huge disaster for Jews. So it was held up as a negative example. And so the only thing allowed in the Talmud was just the miracle of the lights. They were like, and for 2,000 years, Jews were by and large mostly nonviolent for 2,000 years. So in a
Yeah.
way, I love the story.
I love the story
Mike?
of the lights. I love that little miracle. I love the idea that we've got in this country a major holiday that says the lights didn't go out. And that actually is the first time that the light is mentioned at all in Jewish tradition, because it's listed as, the temple shall include a light, but that looks like somebody added that later. And, something brought back from Babylon. And, up until that point, nobody said anything about, well, the light's got to be there and it's got to be the holy light and stuff like that. That's got to be sacred oil and things. There's no mention of that until we say, oh no, we don't, we've got to get this stuff together. It's like its
Mike?
own new tradition.
I think Mike wanted to add something here.
I just really like it whenever I see Hanukkah acknowledged. Like, I took my cat to the vet last week, and my eyes lit up when I walk in the door, and there's a menorah. There's a display with a menorah, and Hanukkah, I think, is the correct term. Not sure, but anyway,
Yeah.
And I go to an improv class at the senior center called Liberation Laughter, and last Friday, the person leading it said, well, everybody just we'll take turns, go around the room and sing the first line of your favorite Christmas carol. And so people are going around the circle and they were singing Silent Night and Jingle Bells and stuff. They got to me and I said, oh Hanukkah, come light the menorah. And I was so thrilled when the person next to me started singing dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. I don't think either of us are Jews, but it was nice to be aware that, there's other folks.
And I think the dreidel song might be the only Hanukkah song that most people in the United States are aware of, if they are at all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I ran across just is perhaps a bit of midrash, but is that each candle can represent a different attribute, where the first night's candle is faith, and the second is freedom, and the third is courage, fourth is love, 5th is charity, and 6 is integrity, 7 is knowledge, and 8 is peace.
It
Oh,
is
and
well.
that's so much like Kwanzaa too. That's
Yeah,
what
it does have Kwanzaa overtones, or maybe Kwanzaa has
Kwanzaa has.
Hanukkah overtones. It's
Hanukkah
hard to tell
overtones, yeah.
sometimes. I suspect it's a fairly recent tradition, but I like that because, you know, as you light the candles, you can think about that attribute.
Well, yeah, and I think having a little moment to reflect on the light and on whatever attribute you want to, that kind of centers it instead of just being another food party. It makes it a little more of a thoughtful time for family. And to me, that's like, I'm a solstice person. Like that's my the core of my winter holidays. And my grandkids and I had a fireball and build a fire out in our little parking area, and they had folded origami birds and they wrote all their hopes and wishes on them for things you want to let go of or things you're hoping for, and then they put them in the fire and let the sparks carry your wishes up to the stars, right? And it's like having the connection to nature, and I just think it's so interesting that if Hanukkah begins on the 25th day or night of the darkest month, then Christmas probably got that from Hanukkah, right? A strong tradition somewhere, right?
You know what? I think we both got it from the pagans.
Ah,
Whatever the pagan in a positive way, I
Yeah,
should
I think
say.
largely pulled from Saturnalia, which was the corresponding Roman holiday.
right.
And I don't know what the Greeks or the Phoenicians or anybody else did, but yeah.
Well, you got to do something about the darkest night, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it was, there was a big tradition going on, it was bonfires and it was fire traditions and, it was, yeah, there's this, it makes sense. It just makes sense, especially you're in the Mideast and it's clear skies and, you watch the light, get smaller and smaller. That it just makes sense that in a lunar solar tradition, you would celebrate, you know.
Katie, do you have any kind of light celebration things your family does? Or
Um, when I was a kid, we really did Hanukkah every year, every night. And since my kids have left home, we don't really have much in the way of religious tradition in our house anymore. We'll light the Hanukkah candles sporadically as we remember that it's Hanukkah, when the sun goes down. But I would say we're more nature focused than Hanukkah focused these days.
And that's one of the things here is that even more so than Christmas, Hanukkah is a kid's holiday.
Totally. Yeah, we did presents for our kids when they were younger. They would get a present each night, which would mean, one from the grandparents and one from the aunts and uncles, and then we'd fill in the gaps. And it was just a little something. And now we try to do some kind of Hanukkah experience. So there's nothing tangible, but we all do something together, in the winter time, go out for a, high tea or take a trip or something, something we can all do together just to acknowledge
I'm curious about your family traditions. Do the kids, the next generation, hold Hanukkah in their homes? Zann, you're nodding yes. You want to say something about that?
Well, yes. Yeah, I think Hanukkah's, my kids really have always liked Hanukkah. It's just lovely and simple, and when they went to college, they brought menorahs and yeah, it's a lovely holiday. So yeah.
It's also the Jewish way to, where you finally, let the kids play with fire. Because they get to light the candles. I mean, this is,
Exactly.
when they get to light the candles, they're thrilled. That's just.
Good. Susan.
I just talking about light and the candles and the darkest night and what have you. I grew up in northern New Mexico where it was predominantly Catholic. And yes, there were Jews in New Mexico, but we were never sort of separated into groups, you know. I don't remember that at all as a child. But one of the traditions that I still carry on, and even in Las Vegas with all the neon lights, is the farolito. It is a little lunch bag. I put cat litter in the bottom of mine with a votive candle. And on Christmas Eve, we line our sidewalk or our yards with these farolitos, and they are the path for Christ to find us, or God or whatever. I love it for the light. And near Taos Pueblo and some of the bigger places, they do a bigger bonfire for light. So I find it interesting that cross-culturally, the light seems to be something important this time of year.
I know in a lot of Northern European traditions, they would, the whole house would be darkened and all light would be extinguished. And then after midnight, the oldest person would light a candle or a torch or something. And then the youngest person would take the light and pass it to everybody. And that would sort of open it up to stories and, of course, drinking and quaffing or whatever you wanted to do, but telling stories and singing songs. And I do feel like that's probably about as old as winter, right? Rita, I know you do luminarias.
Yeah, I saw an article when I was young about luminarias, and I bought a bunch, and I still have them, but I've used them at my oldest daughter's. I've lined like the driveway with them on Christmas Eve a couple times, and to me, there's just something about that is so magic that I don't know why, but it's just awesome. And so I have a little deck on my apartment now, and so I think I might bring those out and just kind of line them up a little bit, and then, you know, just for a couple hours. I'm having some friends over for Christmas Eve, and I thought that would just be really lovely to do.
We took the Blodell solstice walk this year, and they use similar luminaria as you're sort of going up to the residence, plus a lot of tromping around in the woods, so you can't really see where you're going. So there is that kind of interesting idea of coming in and out of light. And, you know, this year with it being kind of soggy, it was particularly meaningful when you start to see where you were stepping again.
I did hear a couple people say that they weren't so sure that particular Blodell walk was great for seniors. If you were unsteady on your feet or didn't have great eyesight, that would be kind of tricky. But I guess that's where you could carry a candle or something with you.
Well, they gave you little lanterns, but they were not sufficient for the job. You really needed to have a miner's lamp on your head to see where you were going. True enough, you needed to be pretty mobile to get through all that, but it was interesting and fun. And I do think that idea of light that, Zann, you're talking about is a universal attraction. And so all of our traditional holidays, I know you and your family, Ann, were at least hoping to celebrate solstice with a bonfire. And I think that's especially as our traditions, our religious traditions might morph into other sort of less theologically bound appreciations of existence. That's going to be one of the things that certainly sticks around.
Well, I asked my grandkids if they thought they would continue to do the solstice fire, and they said they thought that they would enjoy doing that with their children and grandchildren, which I thought was adorable. But basically, I think that you're right, Eve. It's all about fire and being allowed to light a fire and then poke it with sticks.
Poking with sticks is, you know, that's good.
Yeah, they did add.
We didn't do that when I was a kid for Hanukkah, though.
Well, their tradition is to toast peeps on skewers.
Oh, you're kidding.
I am not. And since they had leftover Halloween ones, they were toasting little ghosties and ghouls and things, which maybe that's appropriate because it's kind of like the Day of the Dead leftovers, right? But I think all these like darkness holidays, this is a tough time for a lot of people. And so I think that we do crave something that reminds us that about the light. I was interested this year that the difference between solstice eve and solstice, the actual solstice in terms of daylight time, was 1 second. So there's a little pool of darkness at this time of year where it kind of pauses. And as you were saying, Zann, the new moon sliver, it's the dark of the moon that really brings it home when you're out in a natural environment, which some wonderful years we have been, and you really see the true darkness, and you see the stars, right? It's that whole thing about you can't see the stars if there's no darkness. But being reminded that you kind of do have to have that contrast, right? I think our electrically amplified families holidays don't give us the real taste of darkness. We get to ignore it if we want to. But I kind of love that in a way that that Hanukkah tradition really is about light in the darkness.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because I think it is. It's, there's a lot of, I think you talked earlier about like the Goddess traditions and such that we're trying to, a lot of folks are bringing back, and the connection with the divine feminine and the darkness, and the infinite darkness, and so it's not chasing it away. It's actually celebrating the connection between the dark and the light. And, the dark is that generative, creative, infinite kind of oneness that then gets, with light becomes multiplicity, and just the balance back and forth between the dark and the light.
Yeah, and I think one of the pieces that has been more popular, I guess, or popularized, is banishing the darkness. And instead, I think embracing the darkness and recognizing it as necessary. It's a little bit braver and a little bit more honest and honorable, right? That we sit in darkness and then we can enjoy the light, right? Or value it more deeply. So Barbara or Janet or Karen, I don't know if any of you have questions or comments you want to jump in with.
Did we answer all the questions that other person sent in?
No, but Barbara has something.
Well, this is just about the darkness and the value of light in that, and it makes me think of the recent power outages that lasted quite some time, and how wonderfully peaceful it was to be at home with just candles on. It was quiet. The light just seemed so special and warm. So I kind of like those outages from time to time. They make me be in a calm place, in a dark place.
Janet, did you have something? I think
Well, I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, which is a Catholic town, and all my friends were Catholic, and my parents were part of the starting members of the first Jewish congregation in Santa Barbara. And I was so secure in being a Jew amongst very few other Jews that it didn't bother me to go to the Queen of Missions in Santa Barbara for high mass on Christmas Eve, where the whole inside of the mission was poinsettias. And so I would sit there with my black veil on my head with all my friends and thoroughly enjoy year after year celebrating Christmas, but also going home and celebrating Hanukkah with my parents. So my father made a huge Star of David out of wood with blue lights. And I wound up here on this little island after marrying a Irish Catholic man. And that shone in my front window up on Baker Hill on a Hanukkah evening, and 72 people came to my house for latkes.
Ah,
I had run into a woman over at the Hirsch Sinai Temple in Seattle. I was buying a few things for my children for Hanukkah, and she happened to be living on Bainbridge. And we started schmoozing, and she said, I said to her, why don't you come over for latkes? Oh, she thought that was a great idea. She said, I know one other Jewish family on Bainbridge. So I said, oh, invite them. It'll be wonderful. Well, they invited somebody else who invited somebody else. So that night was the beginning of a Jewish presence on Bainbridge. And so it evolved into what we call a Havurah, which is gathering, meeting together, which then resulted in the formation of Shir Hayam, which is Zann, and Congregation Kol Shalom, which is on Miller Road.
mhm.
So to me, Hanukkah is a great celebration with latkes, and the donuts and the lighting of the menorah, and the kids all got 8 gifts for every night of Hanukkah. And then because their father was Christian, they got Christmas gifts too. So it was, and when we got married in December, and we had a child in December, and December just is just a whirlwind. So we leave for a family reunion this week to the Caribbean, and I'm bringing my little lit menorah, which is LED lights, because you can't have candles on the ship. So I'm going to light at our table during dinner. I'm going to light the menorah. I have all the gilt, and then I just went to Eagle Harbor Books, and I got books for each one of the kids, the grandkids. So that'll be our Hanukkah this year on the high seas.
On the high seas, do you think
Well,
there'll be
I love-
latkes?
Pardon me?
Do you think there'll be latkes?
It's really interesting. I have found we used to cruise a lot. They always had the latkes, and they'd have the donuts, and we'd have the Shabbat service Friday night. And it was just, a lot of the ships have rabbis on them, if it's going to be a lot of Jewish people on board. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Yeah.
That is awesome. But I can't help but think about when you said 71 people came to your house, that's a lot of potatoes. How did
And
you
then
handle that?
we used to do, when we were kind of a loose group, we used to do Passover. I'm not Passover. Jerry, could you go in the other room, please? I'm on the Zoom. We have company here. Wait a minute. Okay, so let me get we
Hanukkah parties where we'd have all the menorahs lit up, maybe 20, 25, 30 menorahs, and we'd have latkes, and it was fun. We used to do that. It was a lot of fun.
It makes me think that another thing that we can on Bainbridge celebrate at Hanukkah is organizing of Jewish congregations here.
Well, we got a lot of them now. We have
Yeah.
Chabad.
Yeah.
We also have Chabad. So, and I know that Kol Shalom is going to be having a big Hanukkah party. Yeah. We won't be here for it. Yeah. I don't know the date for that.
Dale, you might know the date for that.
I believe it's on the 27th, which is Friday.
Oh, hi, Dale. Yeah. Yeah. It would probably be Kabbalah Shabbat, where they have all the music too. Yeah. So that's
And
it.
were you going to ask about dreidels at one point? I thought you were.
I was,
I
because it was
kind of-
something Bill called out. He said, do people really know the origin of dreidels? And it's surprising. And nobody see. Okay, so apparently it's actually, there was no mention of dreidels anywhere in any history at all until about 200 years ago. And they were German toys that got co-opted sort of, and they're turned into sort of a multicultural toy, but then became that it didn't really have anything at all to do with Hanukkah, except that it was fun to play. And there was stories that got built up. This is the meta folklore thing about how the Jewish men particularly could pretend to be gambling, but they would really be praying and carrying on their traditional.
No, it'd be the other way around.
When the Greek soldiers came to try to harass them, they would say, "Oh, we're just playing a gambling game. We're not holding our practices." But theoretically, supposedly, they actually were. Well, probably not true, since it was 1,000 or a couple thousand years before that anybody got around to inventing a dreidel. But it just was kind of a funny example. So Bill wanted to sort of point out that a lot of things get mixed in.
It's got each of the sides of the dreidel have letters on them.
Yeah, and he said that they actually stood for forward, backward, sideways, and something, but became exchanged for the great miracle.
Netzdo Hayashan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're
Hayashan.
actually different in Israel, because everywhere else in the world, the dreidel has the letters that stand for a great miracle happened there. But in Israel, it says a great miracle happened here.
Right.
And so that last letter is different on Israeli dreidels.
My granddaughter, who's just 8, and she actually has an Israeli dreidel that she was showing me how different it was and explaining. So I thought that was really interesting that Port Townsend schools apparently really spent some time with this stuff. But she was mostly interested in the chocolate coins, actually.
She's no dummy.
Yeah.
I'm ready here.
Oh, there you go. So anybody else want to jump in? I think we got a couple more minutes. I love this kind of conversation that's just so kind of all over the place. Go ahead.
One thing that I think is interesting, so both of my kids, one is dating somebody whose family celebrates Christmas, and the other one is engaged to someone who was raised atheist, but whose family still celebrates Christmas. And I love how they've kind of commingled their traditions. So my daughter knits, and she knit stockings, Christmas stockings for her and her fiance, but hers have dreidels and menorahs all over them. And I just think it's, I think it's great how they're figuring it out for themselves, finding a way to make it work within the life that they want to lead.
So Eve, maybe if your mom had stuck a few Stars of David stickers on those stockings of candy, they would have been okay, right?
Yeah. That brings us back to Hanukkah Charlie. So it's we don't have a Santa Claus, so we had a Hanukkah Harley.
I think there's a Saturday Night Live skit about that.
No, this is decades before Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, but I mean, they took that idea a little bit farther, I think, and have Hanukkah Harry.
There you go.
There's a really nice children's book. I think it's set in Billings, Montana, or someplace like that. And there was a Jewish family that had a menorah in their window, and somebody threw a brick through the window. And then people all over the town began to display menorahs in their windows to show solidarity.
Well, and there were some incidents here on the island a few years ago that were somewhat similar when someone had, I think, a menorah and some holiday lights that were blue and white, and there was some, I don't remember exactly the whole details, but somebody destroyed part of it, and neighbors came again, and in solidarity, it was a cul-de-sac. Everybody put up menorahs and blue and silver lights to sort of say, we don't do that here. Right? Solidarity is what we have to offer each other. Well, on that note, I think we're just about 1 minute to go.
And I just want to say thank you to all of you. It's been wonderful.
Right?
Thanks
very much. And and have a lovely light. May the light be with you, right?